I'm angry with the European Union, and I'd like to explain why. I was just innocently reading the Guardian newspaper this morning, and I came across this article, and I want to share with you what it says. The headline proclaims government offices in EU can ban wearing of religious symbols. Court rules. Decision made in the case of a Muslim employee in Belgium states that restrictions must be applied equally. And I'll link to the article in the description below. Now, I've learned as I've been around longer and got a bit more wise about what goes on behind the scenes, that often states, governments, and someone will say one thing politically about why they're doing something, but the reality can be quite different underneath. In other words, they're being disingenuous, they're not being sincere or honest. And I think the European Union, the court, and I'll read the details in a minute, is being dishonest, disingenuous, and insincere about the reasons why it's banning religious symbols. I maintain, I think the evidence is obvious and clear, that the European Union is institutionally Islamophobic. In other words, in the very essence of its being as a state, it is anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic. Now, this is not left-wing rhetoric. The evidence is here for us to see. It's very clear and obvious, I maintain. And The Guardian actually, I think, gives us the reasons why the European Union is Islamophobic. And Islamophobia is just as serious as anti-Semitism or racism. But the European Union does not have a problem with Islamophobia. In fact, it promotes it and has made it part of its whole being itself. Anyway, back to the article. Now, I'm going to read bits of the article to you, not all of it, and make some comments as I go along, hopefully. So the article says, government offices across the EU meaning the European Union, can ban employees from wearing religious symbols, such as Islamic headscarves, in the interests of neutrality. The EU's top court has ruled, just ruled this way, though it stressed that such restrictions must be applied equally to all employees and fit within the legal context of each member state. The article goes on. The decision published by the Court of Justice of the European Union on Tuesday said such bans were permissible in order to enforce, quote, an entirely neutral administrative environment. I love this quote, entirely neutral administrative environment. Nothing to see here, folks. No Islamophobia, no discrimination, no anti-Muslim prejudice going on here. Oh, no, we're not supposed to see any of that. I maintain this is all rubbish. And the European Union Court is motivated by Islamophobia completely. Anyway, I'll come to the reasons why the evidence clearly says this in a minute. Just to continue with the Guardian article, which I say is in the description below if you want to read all of it. The court was asked to rule after a Muslim employee in the municipality of Ans in eastern Belgium was told she could not wear a headscarf at work. Court documents noted her job involved little contact with the public. So what's the problem? Why was she stopped? Soon after, the municipality amended its terms of employment to require that all employees observe strict neutrality. Is this word neutrality again? It's an obsession. The employee lodged a complaint with a local court, so going through due process, describing the ban as discriminatory and voicing concerns that her right to freedom of religion had been infringed. Now, the European Union, by the way, is really hot on freedom of religion and liberty and individual rights and human rights and freedom to worship, etc. So you'd expect her rights to be upheld, to wear a headscarf. But no. Oh no. The court noted that although overt signs of religious conviction were barred, several photographs produced by the complainant, by the Muslim woman, I assume, made it clear that discrete signs of conviction were tolerated. These symbols included the wearing of earrings with a cross or the holding of Christmas parties, the complainant's lawyer told The Guardian. So these are all tolerated. Christmas parties, little crucifixes and earrings or whatever. No problem with that. Obviously, what's really upset people is the headscarf. So there's obviously Islamophobia here. So the court turned to the European Union, asking the Court of Justice to assess whether the neutrality rule was discriminatory. In a decision that holds for public sector officers across the entire European Union, the Luxembourg based court ruled that a policy of strict neutrality was maybe, quote, regarded as being objectively justified by a legitimate aim. So in other words, it upheld the idea of strict neutrality, and in this case, no discrimination had taken place. Now, the article then quotes an organization of European Muslim youth, which described the ruling as infringing on the freedom of religion and expression. So this is actually an EU-sponsored Muslim organization, believe it or not, which is called, what's it called? FEMYO, so FEMYSO. FEMYSO is a pan-European network representing more than 30 Muslim youth and student organizations. I looked up FEMYSO online, and it's funded by the European Union itself. But even they have complained that this ruling by the European Union infringes on freedom of religion and expression. And what they say, this pan-European Muslim network, is actually quite insightful. And I just want to explore the reasons they criticize the ruling. They say, despite being neutrally cloaked, bans on religious symbols invariably target the headscarf, this Muslim organization said, citing a 2022 paper from the Open Society Foundations that argued that these bans rest on Islamophobic discourses that portray Islamic dress as incompatible with neutrality. And I read that paragraph, I thought, absolutely right. So I just repeat that. Despite being neutrally cloaked, in other words, it's a pretense. The language is there. As I said at the beginning, we believe in freedom and freedom of worship, and we're against discrimination, and we're not, of course, Islamophobic, but this is just a cloak. It's an exterior appearance. The reality is the ban on religious symbols invariably targets the hijab. This is what it's really about, says this organization. And this is absolutely right. And then it continues the article. The ruling could exacerbate the marginalization of Muslim women at a time when Islamophobia was on the rise, it said, adding, quote, Muslim women already face intersectional discrimination on multiple grounds, and such a ruling risks legitimizing their removal from public life. So I think this is spot on. I live in the UK most of the time. If you go to a government office here, I don't know, the civil service, any public body in London and in some other places too in the UK, you might often see Muslim women and men. Got Muslim women wearing the hijab, quite normal. And no one thinks, I can't think anyone's complaining, oh, well, they're not going to give me neutral service. Of course, they don't think that. These people, these Muslim women, men and women, are there to serve the public. They're employees. So they're going to carry out the policies and the administrative procedures of the organization. No one thinks, oh, I got a headscarf. They're not going to give me, a non-Muslim, good service, objective service, neutral service. I think anyone thinks that. The idea is absurd that a piece of clothing can make that person somehow unfit to do their job. But in Europe, mainline Europe, continental Europe, that seems to be a very common view. And it does, as this organization say, it rests on the Islamophobic prejudice that portrays Islamic dress, like the hijab, as incompatible with neutrality. In other words, good public service, helping the public. And this is sheer prejudice. And so that's why I'm angry with the European Union, who go on so much about human rights and liberties and so on. And yet they enshrine here in this latest top court judgment pure prejudice. And the organization, this Muslim organization that I mentioned, FEMYSO, then say they call for, quote, workplace inclusivity, where individuals of all faiths can participate fully without fear of discrimination, including Muslim youth, end quote. Of course, it's common sense. But the European Union is against this. It's against workplace inclusivity. It's against an environment where individuals of all faiths can participate fully without fear of discrimination. It's against that officially now, today. And then The Guardian concludes, today, Tuesday's decision, this is the court decision, echoed several rulings previously issued by the same court. In 2021, it ruled that private sector employers could limit the expression of religious, political, or philosophical beliefs when there was a genuine need. What genuine need could there be? Genuine need to, quote, present a neutral image towards customers or to prevent social dispute, end quote. So it's legal for any employer in the European Union to discriminate against Muslim women when there was a genuine need. What genuine need could there be to discriminate against women wearing a hijab? The reason is to present a neutral image. Whatever happened to religious freedom? Whatever happened to diversity? Whatever happened to respecting the rights of Muslims? Or to prevent social dispute, quote unquote. So if you're in a kind of Islamophobic environment and you have a Muslim woman working in a private company, an employee can legitimately discriminate against them to prevent social dispute, as defined by the employer, of course, not by the Muslim. So this is institutionalized Islamophobia, racism, discrimination, you name it, it's all there in multiple rulings by the highest court in the European Union. And the last sentence in the Guardian article says, 1 year later, it said that such bans do not constitute direct discrimination as long as they are applied equally to all employees. As you couldn't make it up, could you? And just to finish off, among those who criticized the 2021 decision was Human Rights Watch. Quote, Muslim women shouldn't have to choose between their faith and their jobs, the organization said in a statement at the time. Such restrictions were often focused on Muslim women who wore headscarves or face veils and rested on a flawed logic. Quote, that a client's objections to employees wearing religious dress can legitimately trump employees' rights. So a client's objection, a client meaning an employer, so an employer's objections to a Muslim woman wearing the hijab can legitimately overrule an employee's right to wear the hijab. This is enshrined, as we know, in the 2021 decision. So, I know many people already know this very, very well, but and for many, though, it's still a red pill moment that the European Union talks a language of human rights, human dignity, and lectures the world. And Muslim countries, it happened during the World Cup when they lectured Qatar about LGBT rights. The West loves to lecture and moralize and be judgmental about other countries. Of course, particularly Muslim countries, Muslim majority countries. But in its own legal and political discourse, it panders to Islamophobia. It seeks to institutionalize it in legal rulings that directly discriminate against Muslim women and men. And this is official EU policy. So this, of course, would make anyone angry. It's unjust. But also there's a political lesson here, which I keep on mentioning, is that we shouldn't believe the rhetoric coming out of the West when it claims to be X and Y. We need to look beneath that, which is often quite just superficial, really, and see the realities beneath. And unfortunately, the realities are quite different, often opposite to what the European Union claims to stand for. Now, I'm not being cynical here. I'm not being left-wing. I'm not being Muslim. I'm not being judgmental. I'm not being cynical. This, I think, is an objective reading of the facts. And this Guardian article actually helpfully lays it all out for you without really lecturing the reader. You can see what's going on just by putting the pieces together, that the European Union is hypocritically and inconsistently supporting values that it really doesn't believe in. It doesn't believe in freedom of religion, and Muslims are second-class citizens. And I know I'm going to get comments below where people will say, because it often happens, well, why don't you Muslims go back to where you came from, or words to that effect? Well, excuse me, millions and millions of Muslims are European citizens. They are born here or in Europe, the European Union, and have every right to live here. And it is God's world. God made this planet. He made Europe. He made us. And if people are legitimately and authentically worshipping him according to the final revelation of God, which we find in the Quran and the Sunnah, then they are entitled to live anywhere, actually, by divine right. They don't need a European court ruling to say whether or not they can live in God's country, because this is God's planet. We don't own it. He does. We have a right to live here as long as we are behaving responsibly and decently according to justice and truth. And Muslims are doing exactly that in Europe, as are other people as well, arguably. So anyway, that's my rant and why I'm angry with the European Union. And inshallah, one day they will come to their senses and actually practice what they preach. And until they practice what they preach, a healthy degree of cynicism is entirely justified. Until next time.